So I'm a big fan of the work of Junji Ito. He's one of my favorite manga artists and writers, and I just absolutely adore his work. I think that he's always super creative, and there's an element of silliness to his work that's really, quite fun. It's very playful. His work is so good that I've tried to read everything I can get my hands on. Fortunately, Viz Media has been reprinting all this stuff over here in the US and has been translating it into English, so I've been able to read a bunch of his stuff, which I absolutely love. Sometimes Junji Ito can be hit or miss, I think. Sometimes his works just are absolutely stellar and are absolutely just mind-boggling. It's like, how did he come up with this crazy thing? But then other times they're just not as inspired, I guess I would say. But fortunately today we're talking about one of his better works, which is Black Paradox. I don't consider it to be a masterpiece like Uzumaki or Ramina or like Gaio, I don't know how to say it. The fish one, the Death Stench Creeps. But still, I think Black Paradox is a really fun read. I think it's really enjoyable. So one thing I want to make clear right off the bat is I like this work. I think that you should read it. I think Black Paradox is good. But I'm not entirely in love with everything that it does, and so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Because I think it has the potential to be a masterpiece, but I don't think it reached that potential. So Black Paradox has one of the strongest intros to any Junji Ito work that I've seen, which is that 4 people who are planning on killing themselves, they met up over a website called Black Paradox, which sounds awesome. Like, honestly, not the website, where you meet people to kill yourself, but just the name Black Paradox I think is absolutely phenomenal. It's a great title. And so these 4 people all meet together one day, and they're all wearing black, and so that's how they identify each other. And so they decide to meet up in a car and just drive away. They're going to kill themselves with the gas method, where you put the carbon monoxide into the car and it kills you. But as they're driving, they start talking about their reasons for wanting to kill themselves, and what it boils down to is that 3 of the 4 characters have experiences with doppelgangers. One guy, Paitan, wants to kill himself because his school built a robot of him. He was part of the robotics team, and they built this robot that was based off of him, and everyone seemed to appreciate the robot more than him, and so that's his reason for wanting to go out. Tabaro has this problem with a doppelganger, where he's seeing this doppelganger and he gets a real bad feeling about it, and so he wants to kill himself before the doppelganger can get him. Barachi is a woman who has a scarred face, and basically she wants to kill herself because of her birthmark, which is a Victor Von Doom style scar covering half her face. And she has a doppelganger, which is like a mirror doppelganger. Basically, she saw a version of herself in the mirror that was like laughing at her, and so that's her reason for wanting to go out. And then there's Maruso, who's kind of the non-doppelganger person. She's the doppelgangerless person, if that's a word. She just has this feeling of anxiety and dread, and she's scared of what the future holds, pretty much. And so that's basically how the story starts, is these people talking about their doppelgangers, talking about the reasons for wanting to kill themselves. What happens is Maruso realizes that the car that she got into was with the doppelgangers of the people she was supposed to meet up. It wasn't with the actual group of suiciders. Maruso's with the doppelgangers, and all of the doppelgangers die, and then she's able to find the actual group of suiciders who she was supposed to meet with. And they're in the same forest. They were planning on killing themselves the same way as the doppelgangers. And that's basically how the first chapter concludes. There are 6 chapters. It's important to note that doppelgangers are the focus of this first chapter, but they're not really in the rest of the story. So the group meets up again, and they're going to kill themselves for real this time, and they're going to use sleeping pills in this instance. But no one actually takes the sleeping pills except for Paitan, who is the guy who had a robot built based off of him. And so Paitan dies, but he comes back. The pills don't quite kill him, and he starts coughing up these very beautiful stones. And so that's what the book becomes about, is it kind of shifts a little bit from being about a group of people trying to kill themselves to a group of people who have these stones that Paitan keeps on coughing up, and they're going to sell these stones. Basically, the idea is that Paitan, in killing himself, he created a gateway to the spirit world. The spirit world is the place where the stones are coming from. What happens though is that whenever Paitan starts coughing up these stones initially, Maruso decides to take him to a hospital, because she works at a hospital, and so she's a nurse, and she decides to take him to a hospital because there's something wrong with him. Basically, he survived his suicide attempt, and he's coughing up these stones, and so that's pretty weird, right? And so she takes him to the hospital, and she doesn't want to be caught, and so she leaves him there. Meanwhile, the other 2 who stick around, Tabaro and Barachi, who are the ones, Tabaro is the one with the doppelganger. He was going to kill himself before the doppelganger could get him, and then Barachi's the one with the Victor Von Doom face. Those 2 stick around and collect all the stones that Paitan was coughing up. That's when the focus kind of shifts to selling these stones, which are called paradonite. The idea being that they're paradonite because they come from paradise. I think it would have been a really interesting direction to kind of treat this like a modern day Partner's Tale, or like the Treasure of Sierra Madre, where basically you have this group of friends that has access to this rich treasure and fights over it. I think that would have been a really interesting direction, but that's not really what happens. They just work together. They come to realize that the stones can be used as an energy source. They're just full of energy and they're super powerful. And so Tabaro hits a stone at one point with a hammer and it kind of explodes a little bit. It doesn't completely explode, but spirits start flying out of it. And one of the spirits seems to go into the robot that was based off of Paitan. At this point, it's revealed that Paitan died whenever Maruso took him to the hospital, and his stomach was carved out because even though he was dead, it's still coughing up these stones from the spirit world. And so the group basically falls into cahoots with a doctor, the one who operated on Paitan and took his stomach out. So I'll go ahead and tell you now, I'm going to be spoiling the rest of the story. So the doctor who operated on Paitan basically took out Paitan's stomach and he threw it into a large swimming pool where it grew. And at this point, the pathway to the spirit world can be swam into. It's big enough to where people can actually go in and out of it. But the problem is that if you go into it, you die, except for Paitan's robot. He is the only one who can swim through Paitan's stomach and go into the spirit world, at which point they're able to harvest more peridonite. Really, I think that this is one of Junji Ito's more interesting stories because it relies less upon the horror of monsters or just creepy sights and more upon the characters talking to each other and kind of planning things out. It's much more character focused than a lot of his other work. The characters are more three-dimensional. They even make some jokes a couple times. And so it's a really gripping read just because of that, because you're interested in seeing where the characters are heading and what they're doing. And always in the back of your mind is the fact that these characters kind of came together because they were planning on killing themselves. And instead they become hooked into this giant scheme of trying to sell the peridonite and make money off of it. And some characters turn on others, and it's just really interesting. To sum up the story from this point on, Paitan's gateway to the spirit world is still functional, and only the robot is able to go through it. But then Barachi's birthmark, her Dr. Doomscar that I keep on referring to, starts shooting out these stones as well, just like Paitan's stomach. But then the doctor who took out Paitan's stomach takes out Barachi's birthmark and fixes up her face and makes it pretty, basically. Barachi has her birthmark. Tabaro has his shadow, like his doppelganger has gotten to him, and so he's able to go to the spirit world through his own shadow. And Maruso has a brain tumor that she takes out and is cultivated into a gateway. At this point, the story is pretty quickly concluded. The doctor who did the operations on everyone then treats them like a team. He has them go through the gateways to the spirit world, each person going into their own one to get more peridonite. And Maruso, who at this point can tell the future for some reason, now explains the downfall of humanity by basically saying that there are souls trapped in these peridonite stones, and basically humans are destroying their own souls by using it as a resource and using it as energy, which is what the future holds. Basically, the doctor will become rich and famous and he will be well known, but then things will collapse in on themselves as people realize what the peridonite is and they'll get mad at the doctor and everything. And so the story ends with the main cast going back into their gateways in order to collect more peridonite, and that's where it ends. There were a couple things I left out, such as the love subplots, but mostly I think that's a pretty decent summary of the story. Like I said at the beginning, I would definitely recommend this one. I think it's really fun, but I do have some problems with it. And this is what I think keeps it from being a great book. Basically, I think it's really good, I think it's strong, but I don't think it's as strong as it could be. I think it could have been a masterpiece, and I just don't think it ultimately lives up to that title. One of the reasons why I wouldn't label it as a masterpiece is because of the fact that the doppelgangers are never really explained. Like I said in chapter 1, you have doppelgangers for all the characters minus Maruso, and the doppelgangers are just never really explained. So for instance, why does Barachi have a mere doppelganger? I don't know. It's not ever touched on again after the first chapter. And why does Tabaro have his own doppelganger that he sees everywhere? And again, I don't know. It's not explained. Paitan having his robot doppelganger actually doesn't bother me that much because it is explained. It was just made by the school that he was going to. But it is very weird that you have all these characters with their own doppelgangers and it's never touched on again after the first chapter, minus the robot, which comes back for the rest of the book. The reason why this is such a big problem for me is because ultimately there are multiple sources of supernatural horror in this book because of that. So the main source of horror is the gateway to the spirit world, and that's really the focus of the book is, you know, you have these gateways that are popping out stones, and it's about what these people are doing with these stones, and I think that it's just a really interesting premise. But then you have other supernatural horrors in the form of the doppelgangers. Again, Barachi has her mere doppelganger, and then Tabaro has his own doppelganger that he sees in different places, and it just bothers me that you have have multiple supernatural sources in the same story, especially when the doppelgangers are treated like a normal occurrence because of the fact that all the characters just seem to kind of go along with it. They don't ever question the fact that there are doppelgangers chasing them. And so you just have this weird first chapter that doesn't quite seem to go along with the others. I think that this is probably an instance where Junji Ito was sort of making it up as he went along, and he thought that the story was going to go in one direction with the doppelgangers, but then ultimately it went in another direction. Of course, I don't know this for sure, and Junji Ito himself is the only person who knows for sure what happened and what the thought process was behind his making of the story. And then another thing that's never explained that's a little bit frustrating to me is, like I said, Maruso at the end of the story can all of a sudden see the future, and so she just knows how everything is going to turn out. Why? There isn't anything to suggest that the stones themselves give any, kind of omniscience or anything like that. And so that's why this story is kind of frustrating to me, is because you have these things that sort of happened and they're never really explained. And I'm okay with no explanations in horror. In fact, I think that most horror even benefits from not having explanations for their villains. But the problem is that whenever you have multiple supernatural things going on, then you need some kind of overarching explanation for all of it. There's a rule that exists in screenwriting, or a rule, I should say. It's not an official rule, but it's just a good idea to keep in mind. And I think it's something that applies to other mediums as well, that says that you should only have one source of craziness, I guess we'll call it. Because if you have random things start happening all over the place, then it's harder for the audience to suspend their disbelief, basically, and just accept that all of this is happening. There needs to be some kind of overarching explanation for any crazy thing that happens. I think it complicates things a little bit if you have multiple supernatural things happening. I'm sorry to keep on dwelling on this, it just has really bothered me, and this is pretty much the thing that keeps me from thinking that Black Paradox is a masterpiece. The fact that Junji Ito just sort of brings in all these different ideas and then doesn't really connect them in any meaningful way. But again, in spite of my criticisms, I still think it's a fun ride. I still think it's a ride worth going on. Again, just to clarify, I love Junji Ito. I love his work. I think he's a phenomenal creator and he's one of my favorite writers and artists. I will continue to read everything put out by him that I can get my hands on. I just find this really frustrating because I think that this could have been a masterpiece, but I just don't feel like this story lives up to the label. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Adios.